To our webinar this morning to launch the Better Together relationship report and support materials. So we'll give everyone a few moments to come in, and we'll kick it off formally in a moment or two. While we're waiting to start, if people would like, they could use the chat facility just to say hello and to say where they're logging in from this morning. Love to see who's with us this morning. Started off saying hello. Morning, Mark. Now we have Chris from KCYS, Eva from Froiga. They're all coming in now. Great. And I can see the numbers rising.
Morning.
Good morning. I think we may have most of our panelists on with us now, so we'll just kick off in 2 moments.
Okay.
We're just watching everyone come in and say where they are, so I can see great coverage from across the country, which is fabulous. Okay, so we'll get started. So again, welcome everyone, and in particular I'd like to wish Minister Niall Collins, TD, and all who've joined us this morning as we formally launch our Better Together research report, the relationship guidance, document and poster, and the forthcoming supports for its implementation. My name is Helen Fitzgerald. I'm the MC for this morning. I'm the Assistant Director of the Research Evidence into Policy Programmes and Practice programme here in UL, also known as REPPP. I know that most people here this morning are probably very familiar with us, but just in case we have some new faces, REPPP is a strategic research collaboration between the School of Law in UL and the Department of Justice. And our aim is to undertake research to inform policy, the development and implementation of policy programmes and practice in youth justice in Ireland. So I'm very happy to be emceeing this morning. My job is to take us through the event over the next hour. We have a number of speakers who will explain further the context for the relationship report and the support materials that we're launching this morning. The importance of this work and how we'll be using it and supporting it going forward. So before I start, I'd like to just say that this event has been recorded and we hope to make it available in the future so people can watch back and I suppose listen back to the talks we had this morning. So without further ado, I'd like to kick off the event by formally inviting the Minister of State at the Department of Justice, Home Affairs and Migration with special responsibility for international law, law reform and youth justice, Mr. Niall Collins TD, to formally launch our reports.
Good morning. Thanks very much, Helen, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you all this morning. And there's a large participation in this call, so it's great to see that we have so much interest and people, as you say, from around the country. So I have a nice little contribution here prepared by the Department of Justice, which I'll give to you in a minute. But I just want to say, on my own behalf, but before I go into what the department has prepared for me here as our message, just to say thanks to all of you for all of your work, for all of your research, and for all of your input. The whole since I got into this role, I find the whole youth justice space, if I could call it, really. It's a really great place in terms of the work that's been done, and I just want to congratulate all of you for the work that you do, and to say on behalf of the Department of Justice and on behalf of the government, just to thank you for all of your work and your input. So I'll just proceed, and I'll deliver what they've given me here, which is our message, and just to wish you well with the remainder of the event. I won't be able to remain on too long, if you don't mind, because I'm coming to you from my home here, and I have Billy Kelleher, MEP, landing here quite shortly, and we have a number of engagements also, if that's okay with you. So it's a pleasure to join you to formally launch these significant and interconnected pieces of work: the Better Together report, the new practitioner guidance on effective relationships in our youth diversion projects, and the relationships in youth work podcasts we're launching today will make a very real contribution to youth work. I want to thank the REPPP team at the University of Limerick and, of course, the Department of Justice officials, the Youth Diversion Projects, but most importantly, the young people and the practitioners whose voices and experiences are at the heart of this work. The Better Together report marks the culmination of a 3-year action research project involving 16 of our youth diversion projects, 60 youth justice practitioners, their managers, community partners, the Gardaí, of course, and 27 young people who generously gave of their time and their insights. Youth justice in Ireland is built on the principle of diversion and the belief that early and supportive intervention works. The Youth Justice Strategy commits us to strengthening our evidence-based practice, widening supports for vulnerable young people, and reducing harmful behaviours. The Better Together report directly advances on that mission. Every year, youth diversion projects spend an enormous amount of time engaged in relationship building. Until now, very little of that work had been documented or evaluated. So Better Together fills that gap. It provides evidence that relationships, when done well, contribute to outcomes we care deeply about: improved well-being, increased resilience, stronger connections, and reducing offending. And that is why today's launch is so important. As our youth diversion projects continue to scale out relation practice in 2026, the REPPP team will support implementation through workshops, webinars, reflective practice processes, and further practitioner engagement. These supports mean that the guidance does not sit on the shelf. It comes as a living resource, shaped, tested, and improved by the people who will use it daily. So I'd also like to officially acknowledge the REP team, particularly Caitlin Lewis, Jackie Dwan, Owen O'Mara Daly, and Professor Sean Redmond for their leadership and commitment in this research. The 16 YDPs who took part in this extensive action research process, the 60 practitioners whose honesty, expertise, and practice wisdom shaped the model, the young people whose courage in sharing their experiences ensures this work remains grounded in reality, and my own department officials for supporting this very important research. So this project is a testament to collaboration, co-design, and genuine partnership between research, policy, and frontline practice. The Better Together model is not the final word, it is the beginning of a new chapter. As this work is scaled across all of our YDPs, we will continue to gather evidence, refine the model, and ensure relation practice remains front and centre in our youth justice. Because when a young person feels safe, seen, supported, and believed in, change becomes possible. And when we invest in relationships, we invest in stronger communities, we reduce harm and better futures for our young people across Ireland. So finally, my thanks again to everyone involved in working on this report and also on the guidance report in relation to relationships and relationships in the youth justice, in the youth work podcast series. So thanks very much, and we look forward to seeing you all again in the not too distant future. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you very much for your kind words, and in particular for your support and the support from your department for this research in the past and going forward. It's much appreciated. So next I will call on Professor Sean Redmond, who will speak about the context and the rationale for the research. Sean has been Director of REPPP for 10 years. Prior to this, Sean has held positions in the civil service and the NGO sector and has practiced as a social worker and a probation officer. Sean is going to share some of his personal reflections on how the concept of relationship has developed his own sense of how relationships can help young people. And as leader of REPPP, he will share his hopes for developing this work further. So over to Sean.
Thanks so much, Helen, and good morning, everybody. Delighted to give a short input today. I'm fascinated by relationships. I'm fascinated by what they are, what they do, what they represent, and what they're capable of, and how at the end of the day they help us define as human beings. Healthy co-reliance, capable of collaboration, and of joint effort towards common goals. If you look at the dictionary definitions, they say the way in which two or more concepts, objects, or people are connected, or the state of being connected, or how people or groups regard and behave toward one another. Even these drier dictionary accounts capture this natural reciprocity between individual humans who have a bond and something in common. I've been interested in relationships in a professional way for a long time. As a social worker, a manager, a public sector worker, and latterly as an academic. In 2009, over 15 years ago, I had a job as head of young offender programmes with the Irish Youth Justice Service. I visited every youth diversion project in the country to get a sense of the work, talking to youth workers, juvenile liaison officers about what they do, how they perceive their role, how they think about making things better with the young people they worked with, and their logic for why they thought it would work. It was fascinating. I shared my reflections in the 2009 report following the fieldwork and made 29 references to relationships. I reported, dynamic relationships formed between adults and young people are both beneficial in developing self-worth, securing opportunities, and a capacity for self-reflection and self-efficacy. So, they don't just do things, they empower, and done well, they build on young people's agency. At this very early stage, 6 months into the job, I also reflected, though obvious, it's worth stating that if there's no relationship between project staff and the young person, then there's no intervention. I arrived at a joint philosophical, practical appreciation of relationship, where it was clear that in its finest form, it was most expertly deployed by youth justice workers and juvenile liaison officers as a craft. And by that I mean a combination of being scientific and tool savvy in terms of how to approach relational interventions with young people, but also with a dusting of alchemy that was near impossible to describe. Nonetheless, as a bundle, this phenomenon was really special. I moved on in another personal iteration where I led the value for money evaluation on targeted youth programs in 2014. The value for money formula was quite rigid, follow the money. However, given that most of the money in programs concerned was spent on people, youth workers, and what they did, it inevitably drew me again to the front line. Again, captivated by stories by young people and youth workers about how their collective efforts negotiated some really tough barriers and adversities with agility underpinned with mutual affection, trust and respect, I reflected a bit further. Relationships get 54 mentions in the Value for Money report. I reported, effective relationships that young people develop with youth professionals permit them to co-produce outcomes, and referring to the relationship as a key mechanism bringing about change and providing ongoing beneficial intervention in between any formal or structured program activity, and as a reflexive intervention in its own right. It was at this point I had a light bulb moment. When we think about policies designed to help improve the lives of young people, or any other human services for that matter, we need to invert the traditional top-down way of looking at how policies are implemented. The action happens on the floor. It happens at the interchange between a young person and a youth worker. This is where the youth justice policy ambition of helping young people do less bad stuff and more good stuff ignites. Where we try and keep at a distance the potentially contaminative effects of the formal youth justice system. It also follows that every cent in the administrative system over and above this interchange should demonstrate that it's adding value to enable the conditions for the best relationships to be cultivated. Have a think about that. This realisation may seem obvious to many colleagues, but it blew me away. A kind of new common sense. If there is no relationship, then the policy has failed. I still hadn't figured out, though, what makes a great relationship as opposed to a so-so one. They must both exist, coexist. And so I wrote The relationship has retained an indefinable, enigmatic quality. This brings me more up to date, and I'll leave you with some reflections that are currently energising me with this work. We should embrace the craft of the relationship. The craft analogy is deliberate. It captures the scientific development of tools and the ways of thinking, but on its own pretty useless without a skilled hand to use and in some case refine the tools. The Mastery group of youth workers was a deliberate strategic choice to improve the science. This group has really stuck with us throughout the initial formative process and has helped us to negotiate the unknowns with their expert nous. We still need in some way to describe what the best relationships look like so that each young person benefits from the best, not the average or the poor examples of relationship. But here, observant of the need to recognise the individuality of the exchanges, we need to think about the character and the feature of relationships rather than trying to attempt to codify them by specifications and precise metrics. Relationships cannot change the world or the structural inequalities that many of our young people face, but they are agile, endlessly flexible and resilient to knocks and shocks. Stacked with intentionality, they can help young people negotiate adversities, seize and sustain new opportunities and get exposed to new affirming networks, and in this way they are potentially transformational. I continue to share a real appetite with my REPP colleagues, featuring Jackie and Caitlin, but involving many more within REPP and our co-designers in the field. I want to say as someone with a long fascination with the potential of relationships and human beings, but obviously as the leader of REPP, that I am immensely proud of the work being launched today. The work, which isn't just ours, but a co-production of effort with a number of seasoned youth professionals, is terrific. It's ahead of the curve and has quite rightly been receiving international interest. So my job was to do a bit of scene setting by sharing some personal reflections on how relationships and I have happily collided over the years and how I never cease to be inspired by the collective genius that creates them. And I hope I've done that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you in particular for sharing your own personal reflections on your journey with the concept and the practice of relationships in your work over the years. I think there's probably a lot in that many here on the call this morning will resonate with, that we have been working in the space of relationships for many, many years, but to have a formal spotlight on it now and to have it recognised as a core part of our work, I think is very much valued. So thank you, Sean. You mentioned in your talk as well around the important role of the mastery group, and a key feature of the relationship projects from the outset was the role of co-creation and involving the practitioners in the research and in the design of the materials as well. So over the last year or two, we've had an opportunity to showcase this work in different settings, and we have some video footage that we've taken on those occasions. So we're now going to share a short video featuring reflections from practitioners who were involved in the relationship study at different stages of the journey. We are very grateful to Linda Kerrin from the Key YDP in Kerry, Mary Lawler from the J YDP in Tala, Dean Murray from the Keep Kilmore West YDP, and Niamh Ryan from the Life YDP in County Limerick for kindly giving permission to share this footage again today. So we just have 5 or 6 minutes of a video, so sit back and watch. Thank you.
I was looking at it from kind of a line manager's perspective. So I looked at it in the context of support structures within the team and how I could support them to have better relationships with young people, and how I could use the themes that came out of the research to examine those relationships. So for me as a tool, as a line manager, it was actually really, really good because it gave me a framework to have discussions with workers around cases. And as part of the research, we focused on the higher risk young people for part of the research in the context of line management, and kind of measured relationships across those themes during line management sessions. So that was really, really useful. And that's, I still would use that. I would still use that to help workers to contextualise complex relationships.
So it was myself and my colleague at the time. The two of us actually took part in it, and I think for us, kind of as a team, like we kind of very much saw we're kind of in this together as a team. We actually have we had a family support worker in our project at the time as well. So, you know, it kind of really involved us sort of sitting down ourselves and just taking time out, which is something sometimes you don't really do when you're in our line of work. You're constantly on the hoof going from one thing to the next. So this was just a kind of a time to sort of say, right, we need to take a bit of time out, sit down, reflect on what we're doing, and look at kind of what's actually happening here in terms of the relationship.
I think the relationship piece is so important. And for years I've been listening to workers kind of saying they don't understand what we do about other agencies and not seeing that as kind of a professional approach to working with young people. So this was music to their ears, really. So it never was a challenge in terms of engaging with workers around the research. Yeah.
I suppose kind of what the most important thing that it has done is really, personally, first, I suppose, kind of to be more reflective in my work. So that's really about kind of thinking about what you're doing, because again, as I say, when you're in it a long time, sometimes you can be a bit on autopilot. So I think it is important to kind of just think about, you know, personally, I found anyway, to just sort of that reflective practice and be a bit more mindful in my interactions with young people, and, you know, just having kind of more purposeful meetings and conversations so that I'm kind of more aware of the impact of what I'm doing and how I'm reacting with a young person and the impact it's having on them. So that's personally. I think from a team point of view, as a team, when we were in it together, because, you know, it's very much our teamwork, our line of work, and it was really important that we would take that time out as well as a team to sit down, reflect, discuss, chat. You know, maybe we would look at people who haven't been like that, maybe showing up, or we haven't seen them for a while. What needs to be done? Who has tried what? Have we been at the house? Have we checked in? Have we? So it's about kind of just setting aside some space to just focus on that, just to focus on the relationship, because as I say, you can get caught up in doing the day-to-day jobs and not kind of focusing on maybe what's really important. So I think that was from a team point of view. And the benefits, we'd say the youth justice sector, we have a very informal setting. So when young people come in, I think that's kind of just this informal, safe space. It's not kind of like that authority, you know, where they're going into school and there's certain limits and restrictions. And a lot of the young people we would work with would find themselves sometimes, you know, on the outside of that. You know, they're expelled from school, or they're suspended from school, or they're barred from the shop, or they can't go to the shopping centre. So they're constantly kind of on the outside. So when they kind of find a space where the door is open, they're welcome, and that's kind of what that setting is providing.
I suppose it was, overall, it was a very positive experience as a team, actually sitting down and taking the time out to look at the model and look at the set questions we had in the team meetings, and actually looking at those sort of best case studies from our work and really getting into the nitty-gritty of how we're building a relationship with young people, the benefit we're seeing in them, and even how we were actually talking to some of the older young people that are going to be disengaging from the project about the research and getting their perspective on it as well. And then as a team, we also had new staff come on board during the process, and we're able to show them this sort of concrete model of, here's a tool to help you build those relationships with young people. And then that's really beneficial that you're able to go and show this to a new staff member. And then we're also sort of deepening our understanding and conscious practice of the model by also looking at sort of other books on sort of youth justice and youth work models in sort of other parts of the world, and how they're about the importance of the relationship as well. So it's been very beneficial for us as a team to sort of create that more conscious practice of relationship building.
The work we do can be quite challenging at times, you know, and it can take an impact on us as workers. So it was lovely to have the space and opportunity to come together as a team and like share intervention ideas, or like, you know, different challenges we had, and to give each other support, because, you know, there's a wealth of experience in a team, because you have people kind of who might be there, you know, brand new, and there's people there a couple of years or even farther. So it's like that whole learning from each other. I think the value of that can't be understated.
I think something that's been really powerful is that when we're coming to you with sort of feedback or questions around how can we move it forward and make it different, you're very open to having that conversation. So it's not like other research where sometimes it's from the top down. This is a research that's very much from the bottom up. So it's really being shaped by us as practitioners. Like we literally had the conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago about the questions. And then last week on the Zoom call, it was literally like, here's 3 options. What do we think of these as practitioners? So it's very quick, it's very responsive. And the feedback of practitioners has really been taken on board to make the process next year sort of as easy as possible. And to capture the magic that Niamh spoke about as well.
The Mugs Metaphor being a prime example that is something we do with young people, like every single session nearly, is, have a drink with them, whether it's tea, coffee, hot chocolate, and sit down and have a chat. So it was great that it put that into a more visual format, and I think we can put them up around our workspace or whatever, those images, and it's just a great focal and reference point for the guidance. And it was a lovely peer learning space as well. I remember one youth justice worker, she shared a lovely poem that really summed up the essence of work of the YDPs. I just remember that when I was thinking back on the process.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, it was great to I suppose to watch back some of those interviews that many of you may have seen before, and just I suppose remind ourselves of those who are involved in the process that has led to today's launch, and how they found the experience of taking part in the research. And I think one thing that struck me there in the comments is people are talking about not just the role of relationships in their own individual work, but the impact, the positive impact on the team and the team building around that. And I thought that was very interesting. And we just might say that if people have any thoughts, or if you hear something that resonates, don't hesitate to use the chat. Just put in your comments. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on what you're hearing, or of your experience of being involved in the relationship work, or how it fits, how it resonates with your own work. So please do use the chat to contribute any comments there. Okay, so next I'd like to invite Jackie Dwan and Caitlin Lewis to present a brief overview of the work underpinning the report and the materials we are launching today, and to outline the next steps and our future plans for this work. So Caitlin Lewis is a research fellow working on relationships in youth justice since 2019. She's also a humanistic, integrative and EMDR psychotherapist. Jackie is also a research fellow who has worked on this project from the outset, and in recent weeks she successfully passed her Viva to become Dr. Jackie Lewis. So over to you, Caitlin and Jackie.
Thanks so much, Helen. I'm just going to attempt to share my slides. Bear with me a moment. Okay. Is this okay? Thanks. Okay. Hi, everyone, and thanks for all attending this morning. It's lovely to see all the names coming through, and people that we know and new workers as well. It's really nice. We wanted to start by, I suppose, just thanking all of the youth justice workers and practitioners who've been involved with this work, who've contributed to, informed and developed all the materials, which have been the kind of the culmination of this part of the project. So we just want to extend that thanks, and by extension, all the young people and families that you work with as well, who have informed what you brought to this study. So we're going to recap just a little bit on the Action Research Project itself, which led to the report that's being launched today and the materials that were subsequently developed. And Caitlin's going to talk to you a little bit then about kind of future steps and where we're going to next. So a lot of you will be familiar with the systematic evidence review on effective youth justice relationships that was conducted by members of the REPPP team pre the Action Research Project, and looked at all the international evidence around what effective youth justice relationships look like. The Action Research Project kicked off in 2019. 16 Youth Diversion Projects volunteered to be part of the process and that journey with us over the kind of 3 years that followed. and engaged with us throughout that process, despite, I think, COVID and lots of other things going on. We went on that journey together. So lots of you will be already familiar with this, will have heard about it over the last few years. So bear with us just while we recap up to today and where it's brought us. So at the initial stages of that journey, we looked at the international evidence that existed from that review, and we brought it together with local practice wisdom from the practitioners in the 16 sites who had told us about what effective relationships look like for them. And we brought that new knowledge together back to the practitioners so that they could engage in a process of co-design with us. So we engaged in a series of these regional co-design workshops where practitioners looked at all this evidence or data and pulled together what they felt was really, really fundamental to the relational work. And we then asked the practitioners to bring that out into their practice, to work through that with the young people that they engage with and their families and as a team, to see and to try out new things and feedback to us around what that looked like for them. So there was a lot of iterative cycles and feedback loops built into the process over the course of several months, where practitioners were engaging with new stuff and kind of checking in with us all the time around how that was going for them. As part of the process, then there was these local, regional, national workshops and events, sometimes in person and sometimes online due to the COVID pandemic. But these were opportunities, I suppose, to engage the practitioners and have lots and lots of conversations and sharing along the way around the work that they were doing. And this relationship journey, I suppose, brought us to a place then where practitioners had identified a lot of the key components and attributes that they found were fundamental to the relational work. And it was about a process then of bringing that together, documenting that, feeding it back to the practitioners again to see, did it resonate? Is this correct? Are we getting it right? And so a whole kind of collaborative engagement to develop the relationship guidance. And in 2024, the majority of you will have attended various events across the country where we disseminated that guidance. So we brought it back to you to say, look, this is what the practitioners have arrived at. This is how we've put it together. And this is the guidance on effective relationships in youth diversion projects. And I suppose that was an opportunity for all of you to engage with us as well over the course of a day and to kind of digest what that was about. But as Sean mentioned earlier, along the way, lots of other kind of things were happening, like the mastery group and other initiatives, including the visual thinkery process that Niamh spoke about in the video, where we wanted to continue to engage practitioners from different projects in developing this process. So what we arrived at was, I suppose, some beautiful materials through a visual thinkery process that capture, I suppose, that effective relationship work in different kind of spaces and places. In 2025, we engaged in a data gathering trial process with 13 YDPs. So we asked new projects to engage with us around, what would be the best way for us to document and capture this relational work that you do, so that we can kind of start to evidence it, but also, I suppose, start to support the implementation of the relationship guidance across the wider network of YDPs. And that's brought us up to the point that we're at now in terms of the rollout, and Caitlin will speak to you a little bit more about that. But just to say, in terms of the Action Research Project, which the report is being launched for today, and the resulting materials, I suppose you'll be all familiar with the initial kind of diagram that went out in that dissemination process, where we kind of collated and captured that kind of real foundational core and base layer work and support that you offer in terms of the time and trust and being young person centered. And then the 7 skills and attributes that practitioners identified as really, really important in terms of the work. And through the process of visual thinkery, then we brought it to a new place, or a new image, if you like, with the mugs metaphor that Niamh spoke about on the video. So I suppose we're really, really thankful to be able to say that these materials, through a process of kind of co-design and collaboration, have now been developed and would have gone out in the post to you yesterday, have arrived probably in some of your projects this morning, or if not this morning, hopefully later today. So you will have all got a copy of the guidance itself, the report that we're launching today, and 2 of the posters for display in your project space. If you'd like to take a moment, I think you can scan this QR code with your phones now as well. And this will just give you access to the website where that relationship guidance and the materials and reports are also available for you to use and share. But the hard copies have gone out to you in the post today as well. Okay, thanks very much. That was a real whistle-stop tour of the process we've been through. I know you're all familiar and you've heard about it over the last few years. Again, just to reiterate our thanks around your support for that. And I'm going to hand you over to Caitlin, who's going to talk to you a little bit about where we're going next with this work. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you, Jackie. Lovely to see so many faces here today. And it's such a privilege to be involved in this beautiful work with relationships and YDPs. So some of you might have heard some of this already, but I'll run through it for those who might not know what we're doing in 2026 to continue this work. So what's happening in 2026 is we're hoping to engage with the full network of YDPs by providing materials. And as Jackie mentioned, they're in the post. So you'll be getting posters, the report, and the guidance, the practice guidance that was co-designed by practitioners. We're also hoping to gather data on how the materials are being used. Like, how are you using them and are you finding them useful along the way? We're also hoping to run different workshops and webinars on relational practice. And what I'll be focusing on most today is the first thing we're going to be doing, our first activity, recording a new podcast series. So next slide, please, Jackie. Thank you. So the Relationships in Youth Justice podcast, and hopefully we think of a snappier name. If anyone has any ideas, please give us a shout. So YDP practitioners came up with the idea of a podcast during the visual thinkery process that Jackie mentioned. And visual thinkery was really a chance to look at all the research we'd done, all the things that the practitioners and us researchers had co-designed together, and put some kind of really inspiring images to it. As Niamh in the video mentioned, the practitioners came up with the idea of the cups, and you'll see on the side there, our podcast logo is 2 cups having a chat. And really very much like the idea of having a cuppa and a chat being intrinsic to YDP relationships is why that theme was chosen. So another idea that came up during this visual thinkery process of generating creative ideas with practitioners was to create a relational practice podcast. And really, I guess, the practitioners really emphasized how much it'd be like, how useful it would be to share the really good relational practice that's happening around the country on the ground in YDPs, and also to include young people. That was a really important point that kept coming up in the discussions. So they emphasize that it's really appealing at the moment to learn through listening to audio and podcasts. It's kind of very convenient. You can listen to podcasts and videos and audio when you're washing the dishes, when you're doing other tasks, when you're driving. And very much it's a way we learn in the contemporary world. And also it gives a chance to share and hear real life examples of practice, but also real life stories, which the YDPs have so many of that are so valuable. So really we thought this was a really good idea, and it's really grown legs since then, and it's a very, very popular idea. So a working group of practitioners were formed after that, and they continue to develop the podcast idea with us since then. They completed Kenya podcasting training, so thank you to Kenya for funding that for us, and then also kind of met to further develop ideas. So after lots of different iterations of the ideas and lots of kind of different contexts with all the different creative resources we are lucky to have in the University of Limerick, we're delighted that we're now able to launch our podcast series. We'll be starting with a series of 6 episodes, and they'll be recorded at the Creative Lab UL throughout March. We're very, very lucky to have a very experienced and charismatic podcast host hosting our podcast, James Leonard of the 2 Norries, and you'll be hearing from him a little later on. We're very, very lucky to have him. So each episode will feature a YDP practitioner and a past participant that had a strong relationship. The pair will share their relationship story from both of their own perspectives. And we thought that really captured like the powerful role of relationships in diverting young people from crime. We hope that it kind of captures the magic of relationships, but also the practice that YDP workers do on the ground and the impact on young people. Jackie. Thank you. So just to reiterate what Jackie said, just a huge thank you to all the practitioners, the young people, and everyone else who's been involved in helping us along the way with this work, particularly the practitioners who really kind of helped us a lot. And it's been such a pleasure to co-design with you over the years, and we're looking forward to doing more of it. Just to really offer that, like, myself and Jackie are open to hearing from practitioners all the time, or anyone else who wants to get in touch with us with any questions or ideas. You can see our emails there, and please do get in touch. The door is open. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Caitlin, for sharing that story and a reminder of the journey so far and all the work that's gone into making today happen. And hopefully, as we speak, the postman is arriving out to YDPs with the reports, the hard copy materials being delivered today, if not tomorrow. And we will reshare the QR code in case people didn't get it earlier at the end of this webinar, so people have a chance to be brought directly to the soft copy links of those materials in the report. Okay, so I am now going to welcome our final and our guest speaker for this morning, James Leonard. So I'm very excited to introduce James. James is a community worker, podcaster and criminologist from Cork. James was in a cycle of addiction and incarceration for 10 years, but finally got into recovery in 2013. Since then, James has studied to achieve a bachelor's degree in social science and a master's in criminology. James is an award-winning podcaster in Ireland and has interviewed people such as Dr. Gabor Mate, Taoiseach Micheál Martin, as well as people with lived experience of prison, addiction and homelessness. James has made many media appearances, including The Tommy Tiernan Show, The Late Late Show, The Claire Byrne Show, Up Front with Katie Hannon, The Today Show, as well as a nationwide documentary and interviews across local and national radio and newspapers. James is a member of Incarceration Nations Network, a transnational network of formerly incarcerated leaders. So delighted to welcome you, James. I'm going to hand the spotlight to you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and perspectives on the relationships work and the power of relationships. Over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, Helen. Is my sound okay?
Perfect.
Great. It's great to be here. See some familiar faces and some new ones too. And it's an honour to be asked to speak at the launch of the Better Together research report and guidance materials. Sorry, I missed the first 50 minutes. There's another conference here. I work in Cork City Council. I'm in City Hall, have my badge. And there's this, the Lady Mayoress is putting on an event today to honour the women working in Cork City in the community and youth services. So I am dressed from the waist down. We don't always dress from the waist down on Zoom. But anyway, it's always good to start with a joke. I remember when I went on the Tommy Tiernan show, and I learnt this very quickly. I get nervous when I public speaking, and I always find humour settles me if I can kind of break the ice. But that same characteristic got me into height of trouble in school. And funnily enough, just to start with a bit of personal story, to kind of set the context, I was in a Garda Youth Diversion Project back in the day. Knocknaheeny Hollyhill Youth Justice Project is what it was called, and it's still known as the Knocknaheeny Hollyhill Youth Justice Project. We used to joke that you had to be robbing cars to get into the group, and partially true. But I think at the time I wasn't really involved in any antisocial behaviour, but I was getting into a lot of trouble in school, and my dad was in prison. So I guess I was a red flag from that perspective. And I must say, and I was talking to Caitlin last night on the phone, the best memories of my childhood was the couple of years I spent as a young person in that youth diversion project. I had the best youth workers. I remember we did a Grease play. I was Kinnicky, the coolest one I thought as well in the cast. And we performed the play then in the Fork and Crane, which is a very historical venue in Cork City on Shannon Street. And it's like, when would you have ever had that life experience, coming from where we come from? You wouldn't have. We used to go horse riding, go karting, playing pool and bowling regularly. But it was the informal work then that the youth worker did in the medium of the activity that when you're a young person, you don't understand that. You're just going out, you're having a bit of fun with the lads, you're playing pool, the youth worker is sound, and you're thinking, like, imagine having that as a job. And it's still a great job. I did the youth community work degree because I wanted to get into it myself. But with my own training and experience, I begin to look back at my own experience as a young person in a youth diversion project, but with the hindsight of, or with the experience then of working in the sector and growing up and doing some personal development and kind of looking back and analysing, and you could see various interactions that the youth worker you would have had. So, for example, I think Noel, my youth worker, who's still working in youth diversion, Noel Kelleher, I give him a shout, Farnry, he's at now, but he was like the buffer between myself and my mum, because my relationship with my mother wasn't great, because I had a father in prison and she was struggling as it was. She had 4 kids and I was doing everything in my power to make life harder for her. And I remember I used to get into so much trouble in school. Now, I was always very good in school, like in terms of I was bright academically, and for the subjects I was interested in, I was very good at. So I was interested in English and geography and history. I was very good at those. I wasn't really interested in Irish or German or the sciences or maths, so I was very bad at them. But I think if I had an interest in them, I probably could have achieved. But my behaviour was very bad, and it wasn't that like it's like an involuntary thing, you know. It's like if I could get in trouble in school for maybe jamming the keyhole in the door with a chewing gum or a twopence or something like that. So then the teacher come along and you can't get into the classroom. The class is suspended. It's great laugh, you know what I mean? But I used to always get caught because the teacher, when everything would settle down, the principal would come in, right, everybody take out a piece of paper and everybody write one name and then it's anonymous, and I used to always get caught. So there could be a big load of drama and I'd be suspended. There'd be a lot of trouble at home for me then. But so my home life and my school life was all negativity. The youth club was where I was happier, and it was where that Noel used to never give out to me. The staff in the Youth Diversion Project were always friendly, and if I was misbehaving, it wasn't even misbehaving, you know. It was just like you're a 14-year-old kid, and that has a lot going on in his life, and you're acting out. And I remember when I studied criminology, when I was in my 30s, and I came across a field of literature about children of imprisoned parents. I didn't know that was a thing. And I began to read this for the first time. And I remember reading one article, a journal article, and it was about children that have a parent in prison can sometimes find it difficult to concentrate in school, difficult to sit still. They might create distractions and be past clown to take them away from how they're feeling. And all these things, these are all typical behaviours. And I was like, that was me. That they're describing how I was in school. But at the time, the teachers didn't either have the knowledge, the understanding, or the patience, so you're not, there's no context for the teachers or the principals in the school. You're bold, you're disruptive, you're a scut sometimes, and you're suspended and you're expelled. But in the Youth Diversion Project, there was context because Noel knew what was going on. He'd take the time to speak to my mum. He knew what was going on with my dad. So when these things cropped up, you work through them. So you work on anger management. You work on how do you express yourselves without throwing something or hitting somebody, these type of things, And I remember, the window of youth work is quite small, really, Well, back in my day anyway, it was like, once you were 15, definitely 16, you didn't really go back to the youth club. This is what we used to call it, the youth club, the Youth Justice Project. And then a lot of us started getting into real serious trouble then from the age of 16 onwards. You're out of school, but you're too old for the Youth Justice. You're out of school, you're not on, you're in that gap. And some of them went to youth reach and some didn't. And that's where a lot of trouble happens. And even to this day, 16 to 24-year-olds are very, very hard to engage. And that's where people are go on their trajectory. Now, there was a lot of interventions happening for me. I think the missed opportunity for myself was when my father went to prison when I was 12, and I was in sixth class before I went to secondary school. So even though he had committed a crime, drug related, he went to prison, I understand all that. But it's a huge shock to the system for the child, and it's not the child's fault. And I remember just finding it very difficult to cope with that. And then I think an intervention at that stage might have been the buffer. I think by the time I got into my teenage years, I think I was on a very kind of self-destructive path at that stage. Now, my story around that is very well documented, so I'm not going to labour the point there other than say that it ended up on drug addiction and prison and homelessness until, as it was said, that I got into recovery 2013. I was 27, 28. And again, I was like, how did it happen? down through the years, I'd had some very good people try to help me, Um, some of the people that I would never have imagined. And one of the ironic things, uh, the straw that broke the camel's back with regards to my turning around my life, or maybe just to begin it, is I had an overdose and two Gardaí found me. And they showed me a bit of compassion, a bit of kindness, and didn't arrest me. They didn't stop and search me. They just, like, we never seen you so bad, James. We know you a long time. You're going to be found dead. You need to look after yourself. Things like that. And out of that, then I got the ball moving to get myself into recovery. So I was socialised in a home and then in a neighbourhood to believe that the Garda was not your friend, the Garda was not to be trusted, that you never speak to the Garda under no circumstances. So in that situation then, where I was so vulnerable at the time, my self-esteem was on the floor, and my self-image, I let people treat me like dirt because I felt like it. And I just felt like I was just waiting to die, to be honest. And then here's these guards showing you more humanity than anybody has shown you in a very, very long time. And it shatters all the kind of, like, what other kind of beliefs am I holding on to that are false and fake? And then I began to look back. There was a prison officer, Miss Stack in Cork Prison, took a shine into me. I used to come in and out. I'd leave Cork Prison like this, like a shiny penny, and I'd come back in a few months later like a different person, gone, very unwell looking, and I'd no life skills on the outside. But she seen a bit of potential in me. And she said, James, you're intelligent. You can hold a conversation in a way that some of the lads that you're hanging on with can't. And she says, like, you could do things if you just got a break. And obviously, and the same woman was doing a course in a university, which I won't mention to keep her anonymous, but she was getting a huge critical awareness on the criminal justice system and prison. And she was getting a huge awareness on the profile of the people that are coming in, the challenges that they're facing, and begin to think like that. A lot of these people here are victims themselves. And again, it's not to excuse anything, because you always have to take personal responsibility for the actions the actions we take and the harms we've caused. But at the same time, there's always a context, and nobody grows up or is born into a life where the parents want you to be on drugs or in prison and stuff like that. So one of the most another key relationship that I have today is with a woman called Sheila Connolly, who's the director of the Cork Alliance Centre, which is a probation-funded project that supports people pre and post release from prison. And my perception of the Cork Alliance was I wouldn't engage with them because they can't get you out. That was the mentality. Can they get me out? Can they get me out? There was never any belief that you could actually have a better life, or that you could actually go to school or work. It was just always about you commit, you do something, you go in, then it's like, how do I get out the quickest way? And if they can't help you to get out. But when I got into recovery and my mindset began to shift a little bit, I started engaging with the Cork Alliance, because it's around the time of this year now where people are applying for the CAO application. And I remember looking at a CAO form and just, it was so daunting, it wasn't user friendly. I didn't understand, I didn't have the vocabulary, and you know what it was as well? I didn't have the €50 to apply for the CAO. And Sheila went through this, first of all, it was the application for the Cork College of Fet in Morrison's Island. So I did a level 5 there, and then I got more confidence. Another thing as well is that a lot of stuff comes up for you when you're studying things like community work as somebody with a lived experience, because you begin to look at developmental psychology, which is very important for a youth worker, what stage of the life of the child are and what kind of developmental issues might they be struggling with, and learn about childhood trauma and stuff like that. But it can be very triggering when you've experienced some of it yourself, So through the different stages of my life, Sheila has been there as like what Noel used to be, as like a support. Do you know what I mean? Because when you're a young person and you turn 18, your life, you don't become an adult overnight, and you don't develop all the skills to want to live happily ever after. I still have a mentor today, and through recovery programs, you'd have sponsors and things like that. So you never get to the stage where you fly the nest, you get a certificate, you're recovered, go on about your business, no? So having relationships along the way, and even still today, are so important for me. And I always say it, I've achieved amazing things that I never thought in my wildest dreams I could achieve. But I tell you one thing, I do not take the credit for it. I turn up and I do put in I have a bit of a work ethic, but the people that opened the doors for me, the people that have mentored me, the people that put their arm around me when I needed it, the people that have gave me a little word of belief or encouragement when there was self-doubt, all that is so important. And but the most important relationship that I have is with my wife. And I know it's a bit of a cliche to say that, but I tell you why it's vital. When I was in early recovery and I was working on a C scheme for the Cork Simon community, the Simon was very good to me. They put me up in a recovery house, a sober house, when I got out of treatment. They gave me a C scheme. I had no work experience, or I had nothing on my CV. So, and I got some training there, I got a reference and things like that. But after about 12 months of that, I was looking for something different, you know what I mean? I felt like I wanted a real job and I wanted to get off the dole. That was always a big thing for me, to get off the dole, you know? It was like I was on the dole since I was 18. I was 28, 29, and I just wanted to be independent. And it's a cliche, or it's not a cliche, but in Cork, it's very common for people in early recovery to want to be personal trainers, fitness instructors. And some of the lads that I was friends with, they were all doing that. And I was like, sure, I'll do that. So I'd no reference point, or I'd no frame of reference to do anything else, you know what I mean? So I applied for 2 courses, one in Colostra, Stefan Nefa on Tremor Road, and another one in Knocknaheeny, level 5 FET college, and I got declined both of them. And I thought I presented well, I thought I spoke well, and I was like, I was so devastated. I remember I was in the Simon cleaning again, and I met the director, Dermot, who I was on the board with him. Dermot Kavanagh, nice man, and I was a bit deflated, like, and they were like, "What's wrong?" We all thought I would just get the course, you know what I mean? That like I was the perfect person for the course, you know, and I didn't get the course. But I learned very quickly that life happens when you're busy making plans. And when I was in that bit of a low point, I met a woman, a very very pretty woman, and we started dating. And she's my wife now. But Gillian was in recovery a few years ahead of me, and she was working in a project called West Cork Travellers, and she had a bachelor's degree in youth community work from UCC. And she was the first person that I met that I could relate with, that had been through university. And she was the first person as well that taught me. She said, "Would you not try to get a job and help people the way people helped you?" And I was like, it was like a penny dropped. It was like, yeah, sure, why not, you know? But the idea of going to UCC was so far, like, removed from me, that it's a daunting prospect until you sitting down with somebody that you can kind of relate with. And I can speak about Gillian because she's on the record herself. She'd been in Ormstown as a young person. She was in Limerick prison as a young person, and she told me her story, and I was like amazed, you know what I mean? But she had a bachelor's degree then as well. So I said, "Where do I go?" And I swear to God, I'm listening to her advice 12 years later, and she never put me wrong. And I did the same course she did in the College of Com, and I did the same bachelor's degree. I went to the same AA meetings as her. I just she I just had a frame of reference. I had a mentor, and somebody I trusted that seemed to be doing really well with themselves. I know nothing about life or recovery or education, but I had somebody here that I could trust. And after after doing the level 5 for a year and the bachelor's degree for another 3 years, on year 5 then I was more confident, and I kind of forged my own path. You know, I did the criminology, started working different jobs, and even in the work as well, being on the other side of the table, on the side of Noel and Sheila as the mentor, as the case manager, as the team leader, you know, working one to one with individuals, you know, mentoring your team, you know, supervision and things like that, you know. It's a different dynamic, but it's something that I really, really enjoyed, you know. Um, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent there now. So the podcast as well. How I got into podcasting, and that'll bring me to what we're going to be doing, which I'm very excited about actually. I haven't podcasted for a couple of months, and I have an itch for it. But I ended up, so when I was in UCC, I was after finishing my bachelor's degree and I got married. And then I got approached to go on the Tommy Tiernan show. And it was interesting how that came about. So the researchers had an idea to interview somebody with a profile like my own, somebody that had come through the justice system that was doing well today. That was the broad idea. They put an email out to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice put it out to the IPS and the probation, and they put it out to the funded projects, and it came across my email address through that avenue. So it was in 2018, and I met with them on Skype. That was, hell, you know, it was before COVID. Skype is gone now, wasn't it? There was no such thing as Zoom back then. So I met with them on Skype and I declined it eventually because it's not just my story, it's my mother and father, it's my community. And how will I be received? Will I come across like I'm blaming my parents because that was the last thing I wanted? Will I come across like I'm talking negative about my community because that's, do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of caveats coming with speaking about your lived experience in a public forum, you know, especially now we'll do it audio only for our podcast to protect people's identity for those that want to be protected and it's a lot safer. But on the Tommy Tiernan show is like the biggest TV show in Ireland, you know what I mean? You get one shot at it and you don't have editorial control and it goes out and people receive you how they receive you and that's it. So I decided against it. And then the next year they came back to me again and I just finished my master's and I basically spoke to my mum and dad about it. And I said, what we'll do, I said, is I was thinking about doing it, but I didn't want to, it's going to be difficult to me to talk about my personal story and not talk about the context of where I was growing up and, you know, what my life was like that. And they said, go for it. Be yourself and be honest and go for it. So with that, anyway, I did it, but it was an amazing, I was received so well by the public. It was unbelievable. I was so afraid. I remember I was behind the curtain and Fred Cook, the MC of the show, he was getting ready to call out my name and I was behind the curtain, right? And there was a full audience. It was the February, it was the January before COVID. And I remember saying, I was shaking. I was saying to the producer, how did I get roped into this? I was like, can I pull out? I said, what if Tommy's house was robbed before or he was mugged or somebody robbed his car and he's no sympathy whatsoever? That's what I was thinking. I was thinking he'd destroy me here. Like, it was like, let's just calm down, calm down. And Tommy was very good. But you know what it was? You want to just be yourself. I tell you one thing, that's because once you are yourself, you can't get caught up in lies and stories because it's the truth. Whether people like it or hate it, it's the truth. And it can't be used against you or you can't be caught up in it. So with the interview, I went so well. I was so calm. I was so relaxed. I was so, looking back on it, I was eloquent. I spoke. I was delighted how it went anyway. And but I was still nervous. And then there was such a response to it, overwhelmingly positive. Um, but the thing that stood out was people all over the country and diaspora abroad were on to me looking for help and support and guidance and information. And I became like a signpost service. He's like, will you come up and talk to my young fella? I said, where are you living? Dundalk. Or, will you come up to Letterkenny and speak to my class? Or I was like, I can't, do you know what I mean? I said, but what I'll do is, I was thinking I'll do a podcast. We went into COVID as well. So all the NA meetings closed. A lot of the youth workers, no, remember the first days of the lockdown, things just closed overnight. And there was a lot of people who were struggling. So the podcast is a great way to reach a lot of people and answer these queries indirectly, speaking with experts, speaking with giving a platform to NGOs and charities and services and signposting people and giving a platform to people with lived experience to talk about, you know. But as well, having kind of come through my education, having done some research, you know, I had the ethical side of it too. So I never asked somebody why they were in prison, you know, or I never asked somebody about personal things about trauma, or I never pressed anybody. And I think my strongest part of my personality and my skills is I have very good interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence. So I can see when somebody's uncomfortable, I can read the body language, I can gauge the temperature in the room, and I stare it away. I always trying to protect people, you know, that they're not too vulnerable, then give them editorial control, give them the video afterwards. Are you happy with that? Is there anything you'd like me to take out? So I always try to um, be protective of the people as well. You know, I think that's important, and not all people in the media are like that. You know what I mean? That people can be exploited, and I see it. And sometimes people ask me, they want to do. I suppose when I did that Tommy Turner show, I didn't really know anybody. I'd know like down through the years, a lot of people have contacted me. I'm going on the Tommy Turner show. If you have any advice, and to be honest with you, I don't, because you can't really prepare for it. But I had nobody to contact because I didn't know anybody like me that had done it. You know what I mean? So, but since then, and you'll see this now as well in your work. You know, when people get into recovery or they turn their life around in the very early stages, they're on TikTok. They're so early in their recovery, or they're so vulnerable still. They're divulging so much personal information, putting it out into the internet. And sometimes relapse is a part of recovery too. You know, sometimes it's just something that you have to go through. And when you're in the public domain and you have that slip, it's so much harder to recover. And as well, when you're in early recovery and you're just going through your personal development and stuff like that, when you put personal information out there, when you're early, you might put out stuff that you'll regret later. So that's why with the podcast we're going to do here is with the podcast we do here, it'll be audio only, so we can protect people's identities. And when you don't have a camera in your face, it's a lot easier to speak. Uh, as well, it'll be quite conversational in style as well. So it'll be like a cup of tea and bringing in my own story and my own style with the relationships between the young person and the practitioner. And I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to record it, hopefully have it all done before Easter. That's the plan. We've got 6 episodes, and I was talking to Caitlin last night. I can see this growing. You know, I could see beyond 6. I could see how you could weave. I know what we're looking at is relationships between young people and the practitioners, but you could broaden it out to incorporate different practitioners, different experts. You know, maybe a young person that was in a youth diversion project that's now a youth worker. You know, that would be a very interesting conversation about, you know, the juxtaposition of having been on the other side of the table and being a practitioner now. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with the team here. And I don't know how long I've been talking, but I'm going to go quiet now. But thank you.
Thank you, James, for those amazing words. I remember seeing you for the first time on the Tommy Tiernan show and was blown away by your story. So I have loved to hear you talk, and I think your story is particularly inspiring. I think there's an awful lot in your story that people on this call today will resonate in terms of the work that they're doing, the young people that they're working with. And again, coming down to those key people you meet along the way and the relationships, you know, in all aspects of your life and all ages of your life as well, that they have such an impact. Some of the themes that I heard and you spoke about was the importance of the compassion, the kindness, the time in particular, the time that people give you. And I think that's, you know, kind of underpins a lot of, you know, the work that the YDPs are doing. I suppose if you don't mind, I might just call on my fellow panelists if they have any kind of comments or questions. And likewise, before we finish, we've another 5 to 10 minutes. If people had any observations or comments or feedback or a question or two for James, just stick them into the chat and we may be able to get to 1 or 2 of them. So I'm just going to call on my colleagues for their responses. And I know we're all very excited for the podcast series. You've really whetted our appetite.
Can I go? Is that all
Yeah,
right?
go ahead, Caitlin.
Just thank you so much, James, for that. I just had tears in my eyes. I laughed, I cried listening to you. I just thought it just really exemplified the power of lived experience and how important it is that we, you know, people with lived experience get the chance to do this kind of thing and that we base everything on that, you know. So I'm delighted that you're a podcast host. I couldn't think of anyone better. And I'm sure I could see in the comments a lot of the others who are here are very inspired as well and found it very powerful too. I'm just really excited to work with you on this, and yeah, excited for the next chapter and just to say thank you.
Yeah, delighted to be part of it. Thanks for asking me. It's this is my area. You know what I mean? I love work. I love like when I was doing podcasting with the two Norries, it was very much justice related. You know what I mean? That was where that's where my interest is. And even when I finished the two Norries, I've been doing podcasting, but specifically just for the prison service over the last couple of years as well. So like, and the reason being is that they're just received so well that the prison service came to me and said since the podcast has been shown in the prison, there's more prisoners, and we call them something different, but for the purposes of the conversation, there's more people in prison looking to access education, looking to access drug and alcohol services, looking to access psychology services that previously wouldn't have engaged. And and that's why they started supporting us with the podcast then, because with the video, you can reach 5,500, which is a lot of people in one video, you know what I mean? So it's a way to get out information and stuff like that as well.
I can see in the chat the words inspiring and powerful are coming up a lot.
I wonder, Helen, could I just say a couple of words?
Jump in there.
Hi, James.
Hey, Sean.
Yeah. I wanted to start out by saying it was kind of sobering and humbling, but James doesn't want to hear that, you know. But the messages that I got was that, you know, relationships can literally save you. You know, in some situations that it can be that human contact that actually saves you and, you know, just stops you going down one path. And, you know, it's just a really important thing that, you know, unless that intervention is there, unless somebody does something and they don't kind of stand by and watch something get worse and worse and worse, that it can actually be life-saving, you know. But then the reality, as you were saying as well, James, is it's a long haul, you know, with possibly relationships being broken and then mended, you know, depending on, you know, how invested people are. And that over time there's been a kind of sequence of relational breaks, you know, so that in different ways, that different opportunities of people who've taken an interest have offered kind of new opportunities as well. But then you flip that as well. I thought the point you made about the show, and rather than thinking how relationships can benefit you in your own life journey, is your own responsibilities then to family and to neighbourhood as well. And so it just shows that kind of reciprocity as well. And just finally, I know James outside of kind of the work, and he's a great person, and I'm so thrilled to have him on the team doing the podcast. It's a marquee signing, as they would say in soccer. You know?
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. Jackie, did you want to come in there before?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to say thanks so much, James. It was lovely to hear your story. A real kind of story of hope as well. I really loved when you said about someone seeing the potential in you, because everybody has potential, and sometimes you just need someone to recognize that and help you to see it yourself. So yeah, it's great. Thank you so much.
Do you know what I told you about the Garda that showed me with it around the same time, right? I remember there's a pharmacy on North Main Street where you get your clean drug equipment. And I remember I was coming out of that pharmacy one day, and I was very bad now at this stage. And outside the shop on North Main Street, there was a few old ones with their shopping waiting for the taxis to pick them up, you know. And I overheard them speaking. They weren't speaking about me, you know, but I overheard them speaking. That's where the dirty junkies was in there to get all their stuff, you know. And I tell you, I felt that size, you know. So it was around that time then where I just felt like that I was invisible, do you know what I mean? And that I was undeserving of anything half decent. It was around that time then that the guard was like showing you a bit of humanity, basically. It's like the most unlikely person in the most unlikely situation at the best time, though. It's all about timing as well. I was in such a good place to receive that. Do you know what I mean? So a big thing as well with youth work, and maybe if I wasn't a youth at that stage, but you know, sometimes you're planting the seed and you mightn't see the fruit of it, do you know what I mean? And, but you'll come across young people that maybe are frustrated at times in your practice, and they went away and they'll come back and they'll bump into you when they're 20s and they're 30s and they're working or they're studying and they've kids, and they'll thank you and you'll have a cup of tea with them. And it's the impact, it's the relationships and the impact we have on people's lives. And when people have difficult childhoods, the youth worker is the one shining light, or can be one of the shining lights in that person's life. When they look back on their life and they think of all the difficulties, sometimes the youth worker is the happy memory part of their growing up, do you know what I mean? And like, what a privilege to be in that moment with a young person in their life story, do you know what I mean? So it's a great job that I won't get into it too much, but underpaid, not great contracts, you know. We started up a bit of a network of youth community work graduates here in Cork that were trying to kind of, you know, collective power and all that stuff, you know, and there are many threats to the profession, and it is a vocation, you know. There's a specific philosophy and practice to youth work. It's a type of person that you can't learn a lot of the stuff that we have in the college. You had the interpersonal stuff, the empathy and the compassion and all these things. You can refine others, you know. So it's such a valuable, job, and I think that together we can get the recognition it deserves. And platforms like this go a long way to that.
Thank you, James. And I think that's your last comments there around the powerful impact and the role and importance of youth work and youth justice work. And the relationships within that is where we might finish this morning. So as I do a few thank yous, I just might ask my colleague to share the QR code again for those who might have missed it the first time when we shared it, where you can scan to get the report, the guidance, and the poster. And so I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today and gave up their time on a Friday morning. Going by the comments in the chat, I think people enjoyed it, and that's always great to hear and read. I'd like to thank all our speakers, in particular James, for sharing his story. I think, you know, it's so engaging, and we could continue listening to you, and we will, because we have our podcast series. So it's great to have you on board. And thank Minister Niall Collins, who opened up the event, and to my fellow panelists, Sean Redmond, Caitlin Lewis and Jackie Dwan. And also I want to thank our colleague Ali Warner, who has been working hard behind the scenes to ensure that all the technical elements of a Zoom webinar that all run smoothly, and it did. So thank you, Ali. So with that, I wish to say thank you, have a lovely weekend, and we will see you out and about in the communities. So thank you.
Slán, have a good weekend, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.